The music box melody of Für Elise filled the grand ballroom as I watched my sister Vanessa spin gracefully in my fiancé's arms. Her white dress, the exact same designer gown I'd shown her from my wedding planning folder, flowed around her like liquid silk. David's hands rested possessively on her waist, his face glowing with the same adoration he'd once reserved for me. "Isn't she beautiful?" Mother whispered beside me, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Vanessa always was the prettier sister. David made the right choice." The right choice. The words hit me like physical blows as the engagement party I had planned in the venue I had booked, with the flowers I had selected, celebrated the union between my sister and the man who was supposed to be mine in 3 weeks. I clutched the champagne flute until my knuckles turned white, watching as David dipped Vanessa low, their lips meeting in a kiss that sent the crowd into rapturous applause. The same crowd that had attended my engagement party to David just 6 months ago. The same people who now acted as if I had never existed. "The accident changed everything, of course," Aunt Patricia murmured to her companion, not bothering to lower her voice. "Poor Amelia's scars, her limp. Really, what man would want damaged goods?" Vanessa stepped in to save the family's reputation. "Such a selfless girl." Damaged goods. I touched the surgical mask covering the left side of my face, where the car accident had left deep gashes that required extensive reconstructive surgery. The accident that happened the very night I discovered the truth about David and Vanessa's affair. The accident that wasn't an accident at all. I remembered every detail now. How Vanessa had called me crying, begging me to meet her at the old bridge on Riverside Drive. How she confessed through tears that she'd been sleeping with David for months, that they were in love, that she was pregnant with his child. How she begged for my forgiveness, swearing it meant nothing, that it was just physical attraction. "I'll break it off," she had sobbed. "I'll disappear. You can have David. Just please don't hate me, Amelia. You're all the family I have left." But as I turned to leave, heartbroken but ready to forgive my baby sister one more time, I felt her hands against my back. The guardrail gave way, the bolts loosened beforehand. I realised now, and I plummeted 30 feet into the rocky riverbed below. The last thing I saw before the world went black was Vanessa's face peering over the edge, her tears completely gone, replaced by cold calculation and something that looked almost like relief. I should have died that night. The doctors said my survival was miraculous. Multiple skull fractures, a shattered spine, internal bleeding that required 7 surgeries. I spent 4 months in a medically induced coma, another 6 months learning to walk again. And during those 10 months, my sister had seamlessly stepped into my life. She visited David every day while I was unconscious, playing the devoted future sister-in-law. She comforted him through his grief over my condition, helped him postpone the wedding indefinitely, slowly convinced him that maybe it was better this way, that maybe what they had was deeper than what he'd had with me, that maybe my accident was a sign. By the time I woke up scarred and broken, David barely looked at me anymore. The man who had once called me the most beautiful woman in the world couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Amelia," he had said during his single visit to my hospital room, "but things have changed. Vanessa and we found something real while you were gone. I know this is difficult, but I'm calling off our engagement." Our engagement. As if it had been some casual arrangement instead of a 3-year relationship that began in college and was supposed to end with "till death do us part." The cruelest part? Everyone acted like it was a mercy. Poor, damaged Amelia should be grateful that her beautiful, unscathed sister was willing to take her broken leftovers. Should be thankful that David was kind enough to break things off cleanly instead of dragging out the inevitable. Now, watching them dance to what should have been our wedding song, I felt the familiar burning rage that had sustained me through months of physical therapy and reconstructive surgeries. The same rage that had driven me to investigate the accident that wasn't an accident, to hire a private investigator who confirmed what I already knew. The guardrail had been sabotaged. The bolts filed down until they would give way under the slightest pressure. The security cameras in the area had mysteriously malfunctioned that exact night, and Vanessa's phone record showed she'd been at the bridge for over an hour before I arrived, plenty of time to prepare her trap. But I had no proof that would hold up in court. Just the word of a damaged woman against her sweet, innocent sister who had graciously stepped in to save the family from embarrassment. The song ended, and David spun Vanessa one final time before pulling her close for another kiss. She caught my eye over his shoulder and smiled, that same sweet, innocent smile that had fooled everyone our entire lives. But I saw something else in her expression now. Triumph, satisfaction, the look of someone who had played a long game and won. She had taken everything from me. My fiancé, my future, my face, my mobility, my place in the family, my social standing. She had literally pushed me off a bridge and then danced on the ruins of my life. But as I stood there in the shadows of what should have been my celebration, something strange happened. The world began to shimmer around the edges, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. The ballroom grew distant and dreamlike, the voices of the guests echoing as if from far away, and then everything went black. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Sunlight streamed through windows that I didn't recognize, casting shadows across a room that definitely wasn't my sparse apartment above the flower shop where I'd been living since the accident. This was my old bedroom, my childhood bedroom in Father's mansion, with its cream silk wallpaper and antique vanity. But that was impossible. I'd moved out of this room 5 years ago when David and I got our own place. I sat up carefully, expecting the familiar sharp pain in my lower back from the spinal fusion surgery. Nothing. I reached up to touch the surgical scars on my face. Smooth skin, perfect, unmarked skin, and my hands were steady, my left leg strong and straight. I threw off the covers and ran to the vanity mirror and stared at my reflection in shock. I looked exactly as I had 18 months ago, before the accident, before the scars, before everything fell apart. The phone buzzed again, and I grabbed it with trembling fingers. The date on the screen made my heart stop. March 15th, 2024, exactly 18 months ago. 3 days before Vanessa's tearful confession on the bridge. 3 days before she pushed me over the edge and stole my entire life. A text message flashed on the screen from Vanessa. "Hey sis, can you help me pick out something to wear to David's company party tonight? I want to look perfect for you too." I stared at the message, my mind racing. Somehow, impossibly, I was back. Back before the accident, before the betrayal was revealed, back when I still trusted the sister who would try to murder me in 72 hours. But this time, I knew exactly what was coming. This time, I would be ready. I typed back quickly, "Of course! Come over around 2, can't wait to see you." But as I hit send, I wasn't thinking about helping my sister choose an outfit. I was thinking about the private investigator's report I'd memorized, about the evidence I now knew to look for, about the friends and family who would abandon me without a second thought. Most of all, I was thinking about David, the man I'd loved with everything I had, who couldn't even look at me once my face was scarred, who had thrown away 3 years together the moment something prettier came along. I'd spent 18 months learning exactly who these people really were beneath their masks of love and loyalty. Now I was going to teach them what it felt like to lose everything to someone they trusted completely. I walked to my closet and pulled out the red dress I'd worn to David's company party, the night Vanessa first started openly flirting with my fiancé while I was in the bathroom. This time, things would go very differently. This time, I wouldn't be the victim. The game was about to begin, and I already knew all their moves. At exactly 2 p.m., Vanessa breezed through my bedroom door like she owned the place, her arms full of shopping bags from the boutiques downtown. Her honey blonde hair caught the afternoon light streaming through my windows, and she looked so innocent, so genuinely excited to spend time with her beloved older sister. If I hadn't lived through her betrayal once already, I might have fallen for it again. "Amelia!" She threw her arms around me, and I forced myself not to stiffen at her touch. "I'm so nervous about tonight. What if David's colleagues don't like me? What if I say something stupid?" "You'll be perfect," I assured her, injecting just the right amount of warmth into my voice. "You always are." She beamed at the compliment, completely missing the edge beneath my words. This was the Vanessa I remembered from before I knew her true nature. Bubbly, insecure, constantly seeking validation. The perfect mask for a calculating predator. As she spread her outfit choices across my bed, chattering about David's co-workers and how handsome he looked in his new suit, I studied her with new eyes. Every gesture, every expression, every seemingly innocent comment, I now saw the manipulation tactics I'd been blind to before. "Oh, that reminds me," she said, pulling out a stunning black cocktail dress that I'd never seen before. "David mentioned he might introduce me to some of the partners tonight. You know, network for my marketing career. He's so thoughtful, always looking out for my future." In my previous timeline, I'd felt grateful that my fiancé cared about my sister's professional development. Now I recognised it for what it was, the opening moves in their affair, disguised as mentorship. "That's wonderful," I said, moving to my jewellery box. "Here, wear these." I handed her a pair of diamond earrings, an early anniversary gift from David that I'd treasured. She gasped and held them up to the light. "Amelia, these are gorgeous, but aren't they special from David?" "They'll look better on you," I said truthfully. They would look stunning on her tonight, when she inevitably flirted with my fiancé while wearing my jewellery. The irony would be delicious when everything came crashing down. She tried on the black dress, and I had to admit she looked breathtaking. Vanessa had always been beautiful, our mother's favourite, the daughter who could have been a model if she'd wanted. But beauty without conscience was just another weapon, and tonight she planned to use it against me. "Perfect," I declared, adjusting the neckline slightly. In my previous timeline, this dress had been the beginning of the end. David had barely been able to keep his eyes off her all night. David won't be able to look away. She blushed prettily. "Amelia, what a thing to say. He's your fiancé." "Of course," I smiled. "I just meant he'll be proud to have such a beautiful woman representing our family." While she changed back into her street clothes, I excused myself to make coffee. But instead, I made a quick phone call to someone I'd never thought I'd contact again. Alexander Hayes, David's biggest business rival, and the one person who tried to warn me about my fiancé's true character. "Alexander, it's Amelia Brooks. I know this is unexpected, but I need a favour." There was a long pause. Alexander and I had dated briefly in college before David swept me off my feet, and he'd made his disapproval of my choice very clear. He'd also made several attempts to reconnect over the years, all of which I'd politely declined out of loyalty to David. "Amelia?" His voice was warm but cautious. "This is surprising. What can I do for you? Are you attending the Morrison Industries Gala tonight?" "I wasn't planning to, but I could arrange an invitation. Why?" I took a deep breath. "Because I think it's time I reconsidered some of my life choices. And I'd like a friend there while I do it." Another pause, then a low chuckle. "Interesting. Yes, I can be there. Should I ask what brought about this sudden revelation? Let's just say my eyes are finally open. I'll explain more tonight." When I hung up, I felt a thrill of anticipation. Alexander Hayes was everything David pretended to be: successful, genuinely kind, devastatingly handsome, and, best of all, completely unimpressed by surface beauty. He'd seen right through Vanessa's act from day one, which was why she'd always been uncomfortable around him. I returned to find Vanessa admiring herself in my full-length mirror, wearing my eerie earrings with her casual outfit. "I think I'll wear my hair up tonight," she mused. "More sophisticated, don't you think?" "Absolutely. Very elegant." I paused as if considering something. "You know, you should really put yourself out there more. You're 24 and gorgeous. There must be dozens of men who'd love to date you." She looked uncomfortable. "I am not really looking for anyone right now. Besides, I like focusing on my career." "Still," I pressed gently, "it seems like such a waste. Don't you ever think about settling down? Having a family?" "Sometimes," she admitted, then quickly changed the subject. "Should I wear the black heels or the silver ones?" But I'd seen the flash of guilt in her eyes, the momentary crack in her facade. She was already planning to steal David, but she couldn't quite bring herself to admit it, even to herself. The cognitive dissonance must have been exhausting. After she left, I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for battle. I chose a deep, emerald green dress that brought out my eyes, David's favourite colour on me, though he'd never wear it again after tonight. I styled my hair in loose waves and applied my makeup with careful precision, creating a look that was both elegant and subtly seductive. But the real preparation wasn't cosmetic. It was strategic. I pulled out my laptop and spent 2 hours researching Alexander's recent business ventures, his hobbies, his philanthropic interests. If I was going to convince David that I'd found someone better, I needed to make it believable. More than believable, I needed to make it devastating. By the time I arrived at the Morrison Industries gala, I felt like a general arriving at a battlefield where I already knew the enemy's every move. The ballroom was magnificent, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over the city's elite. I spotted David immediately. He was near the bar, looking handsome in his tailored tuxedo, holding court with several colleagues. And, beside him, looking radiant in my diamond earrings, was Vanessa. She caught sight of me and waved enthusiastically, but I noticed how her free hand rested possessively on David's arm. How she stood just a little too close. How she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. In my previous timeline, I'd attributed her behaviour to nervousness and David's natural charm. Now I saw it for what it was. A calculated seduction played out in full view of everyone, including me. David's face lit up when he saw me approach. "Amelia, you look stunning." He kissed my cheek, but I noticed how his eyes flickered appreciatively over Vanessa's figure as she adjusted her neckline. "Thank you, darling. Vanessa, you look absolutely gorgeous. That dress is perfect on you." "Your sister has been the hit of the party," David said, his voice carrying a note of pride that should have been reserved for me. "3 partners have already asked for her card." "I'm not surprised," I replied, then glanced around the room as if looking for someone. "Oh, there's Alexander. I should say hello." David's expression shifted immediately. "Alexander Hayes is here. I didn't know you two were still in contact." "We're not, really, but I ran into him last week and mentioned I'd be here tonight. He said he'd try to make it." I touched David's arm lightly. "I'll just say hello and be right back." But as I walked away, I could feel their eyes following me. Good. Let them wonder. Alexander was standing near the orchestra, looking impossibly handsome in his perfectly fitted tuxedo. His dark hair was swept back, his green eyes scanning the crowd until they found mine. When he smiled, I remembered why I'd been attracted to him all those years ago. "Amelia," he said, taking my hand and brushing his lips across my knuckles. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered." "Flatterer," I laughed, but I didn't pull my hand away. "Thank you for coming. I know this was short notice." "For you, I'd have cancelled a board meeting." His eyes searched my face. "Now, are you going to tell me what this is really about? Because the Amelia I knew would never call her ex-boyfriend to a party where her fiancé is present unless something significant had changed. I glanced back toward David and Vanessa. They were both watching us intently, and Vanessa's hand had moved to David's chest in a gesture that looked comforting, but was clearly territorial. "You were right about David," I said quietly. "About everything. I just needed to see it for myself." Alexander's expression grew serious. "I'm sorry, Amelia, truly. I never wanted to be right about this." "Don't be sorry. Be my ally." I turned to face him fully, letting my guard down for the first time in months. "I think I'm about to need a friend who sees through beautiful facades." "Always," he said without hesitation. "What do you need? Dance with me. Make David remember what he's about to lose." As Alexander led me onto the dance floor, I caught a glimpse of David's face. For the first time in months, he was looking at me, really looking at me, with something that might have been regret. Perfect. The game had begun, and I was already winning. Alexander was an exceptional dancer, his movements confident and graceful as he spun me across the marble floor. But more importantly, he was an exceptional actor. Every touch lingered just long enough to suggest intimacy. Every smile carried just enough warmth to imply history. Every whispered comment made it look like we were sharing secrets. "You're quite devious when you want to be," he murmured as he dipped me low, his face inches from mine. "David looks like he wants to challenge me to a duel." I glanced over Alexander's shoulder to see David standing rigidly beside the bar, his knuckles white around his champagne glass. Vanessa was speaking to him, her hand on his arm, but his attention was entirely focused on us. "Good," I whispered back. "Let him remember what he's throwing away." When the song ended, Alexander kept his arm around my waist as he guided me off the dance floor. We moved slowly, stopping to chat with other guests, Alexander introducing me to business associates I'd never met. Each conversation was carefully orchestrated. Alexander praising my intelligence, my beauty, my charm, while I played the role of a woman discovering she had options. "Amelia Brooks," said Harrison Walsh, one of Alexander's business partners. "I've heard so much about you. Alexander mentioned you were engaged to David Morrison." "Yes," I replied, but let a note of uncertainty creep into my voice, though I'm starting to wonder if that was the right choice. Alexander's arm tightened slightly around me. A warning, but also encouragement. "Amelia's been reconsidering her priorities lately," he said smoothly. "Success and ambition aren't everything in a relationship." The implication was clear. David was successful and ambitious, but lacking in other areas that Alexander possessed in abundance. Within 30 minutes, half the party was buzzing with speculation. The other half was placing bets on whether David Morrison was about to lose his beautiful fiancée to his biggest competitor. I excused myself to the ladies' room, knowing Vanessa would follow. Sure enough, she appeared moments later, her expression tight with barely concealed panic. "Amelia, what are you doing?" she demanded the moment we were alone. "You're embarrassing David. Everyone's talking about you and Alexander." "Are they?" I touched up my lipstick with studied indifference. How unfortunate. I was just being friendly to an old college acquaintance. That wasn't friendly, that was intimate. You were all over each other on the dance floor. I turned to face her fully, letting my mask slip just enough to show steel beneath. "And David was all over you at the bar. Your point?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "What are you talking about? I was just being social, networking like you suggested." "Networking." I repeated the word slowly. "Is that what we're calling it when you stroke a man's chest and lean against him like you own him?" "Amelia, you're being ridiculous. David loves you. He's going to marry you in 3 weeks." "Is he?" I stepped closer, and she instinctively backed against the marble counter. Because from where I stood, It looked like he could barely tear his eyes away from his future sister-in-law long enough to notice his fiancée dancing with another man. "You're paranoid," she stammered, but her face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "David would never..." "Never what, Vanessa? Never betray me. Never choose someone else. Never fall for a beautiful woman who throws herself at him while his boring fiancé isn't looking." She stared at me in shock. For the first time since we were children, I'd spoken to her without the protective softness of an older sister. For the first time, she was seeing who I really was beneath the nurturing facade. "I don't know what's gotten into you," she whispered, "but you're scaring me." "Good," I said quietly. "You should be scared, because the game you're playing, I invented it." I left her standing there, pale and shaking, and returned to the ballroom where Alexander was waiting with 2 glasses of champagne and a knowing smile. "Successful reconnaissance mission?" he asked. "Very. She's rattled, which means she'll make mistakes." As if summoned by my words, David appeared at my elbow, his face flushed with alcohol and something that might have been jealousy. "Amelia, can I speak with you privately?" Alexander raised an eyebrow but stepped back gracefully. "Of course. I'll be here when you're ready." The possessive undertone wasn't lost on David, whose jaw tightened visibly. He led me to a quiet alcove overlooking the city lights, his hand gripping my elbow just a bit too tightly. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his composure finally cracking. "You're making a spectacle of yourself with Hayes. People are talking." "Let them talk," I replied calmly. "I'm having a wonderful time reconnecting with an old friend." "Friend?" David's laugh was bitter. "That man wants to fuck you, Amelia. It's written all over his face." I felt a surge of triumph. This was the David I'd glimpsed in private moments. Crude, possessive, entitled. The man he hid behind his polished public persona. "Perhaps," I said thoughtfully. "He is very attractive and successful, and he seems genuinely interested in what I have to say, which is refreshing." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I moved closer, letting my voice drop to a whisper, "that maybe I've been settling. Maybe there are better options out there than a man who spends the entire evening staring at his fiancée's sister instead of his fiancée." David's face went white. "I wasn't. You were. We both know you were. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" For a moment, he looked genuinely panicked. This wasn't the Amelia he knew, the understanding, forgiving woman who made excuses for his wandering eye and accepted his half-hearted apologies. This was someone new, someone who might actually leave him. "Amelia, I love you," he said desperately. "You're the most important thing in my life. If I was looking at Vanessa, it's only because she reminds me of you. She's your sister. Of course, there are similarities." It was a practiced lie, delivered with the sincerity of a man who'd convinced himself it was true. In my previous timeline, I might have believed it. "How flattering," I said dryly. "You love me so much that you can't stop fantasizing about a younger version." "That's not what I meant. David." I placed my hand on his chest, right where Vanessa had touched him earlier. "We're getting married in 3 weeks. If you're having doubts, if you think you might be happier with someone else, now is the time to say so." The trap was perfect. If he said yes, he'd be admitting his feelings for Vanessa. If he said no, he'd be recommitting to me just as I was about to demonstrate that I had better options. "No," he said firmly, "no doubts. You're the only woman I want to marry." "Good," I smiled and straightened his tie. "Then prove it. Stop staring at my sister like she's dessert and start treating your fiancée like the prize she is." I started to walk away, then paused and looked back over my shoulder. "Oh, and David, Alexander asked me to dinner tomorrow night. I said yes. Just dinner between old friends, you understand? Unless you have any objections." The look on his face was worth 18 months of pain and humiliation. I rejoined Alexander at the bar, where he was chatting with several prominent businessmen who seemed genuinely interested in whatever he was saying. The contrast with David's circle, where the conversation rarely rose above sports and stock prices, was striking. "Everything all right?" Alexander asked quietly. "Perfect. David just gave me permission to have dinner with you tomorrow night." "Did he now? How generous of him." Alexander's smile was sharp as a blade. "I know exactly the place. Intimate, exclusive, and guaranteed to be photographed by society reporters." "You're terrible," I laughed and realised with surprise that I was actually enjoying myself for the first time in months. "I prefer thorough. If we're going to destroy David Morrison's ego, we might as well do it properly." Across the room, I could see David and Vanessa in heated conversation. She was gesturing frantically, clearly distressed, while he looked torn between comfort and guilt. The perfect tableau of two people caught between desire and loyalty, with neither strong enough to resist temptation. "They're fighting," Alexander observed, following my gaze. "They're panicking," I corrected. "She realises I'm not the pushover she expected, and he realises he might actually lose me. Fear makes people desperate. And desperate people make mistakes." "Exactly." I raised my champagne glass in a mock toast. "To mistakes. May my enemies make them frequently and spectacularly." Alexander clinked his glass against mine, his green eyes dancing with amusement and admiration. "You know, Amelia, I think I'm falling for you all over again. The real you, not the shadow you were with Morrison." For a moment, I felt a flutter of something genuine attraction, possibility, hope. Then I remembered why I was here, what Vanessa had done, what David had allowed. "We'll see," I said softly. "But first, I have a wedding to cancel and a sister to destroy. Think you're up for the ride?" "Darling," Alexander grinned, "I thought you'd never ask." The next evening, Alexander picked me up in his midnight blue Aston Martin, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than David's monthly salary. But more importantly, he looked at me like I was the most fascinating woman in the world, a look I'd forgotten I deserved. "Ready to break the internet?" he asked, helping me into the passenger seat. "Ready to break David's heart?" I corrected, smoothing my black silk dress. "The internet is just collateral damage." Le Bernardin was exactly as Alexander had promised: intimate, exclusive, and crawling with society photographers. We were seated at the most visible table in the house, where every kiss of my hand, every intimate laugh, every lingering touch would be captured for tomorrow's gossip pages. "Tell me something," Alexander said, pouring wine that cost more than most people's rent. "Are you using me to make David jealous, or are you genuinely considering giving us another chance?" His directness caught me off guard. "Does it matter?" "It does to me. I'm not interested in being a pawn in someone else's chess game, even if that someone is you." I studied his face, seeing none of David's calculating charm or hidden agendas, just honest curiosity and something that looked like genuine affection. "I don't know," I admitted. "Right now, revenge feels more important than romance. But you make me remember who I used to be, before David made me feel like I had to compete for his attention, before Vanessa made me feel like I wasn't enough. You were always enough, Amelia, more than enough. David's just too stupid to see it." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "We need to talk. Now." Then another from Vanessa. "Please come home. Something terrible has happened." Alexander noticed my expression. "Trouble in paradise?" "Something like that." I showed him the messages. "They're panicking faster than I expected." "Good. Panic leads to poor decisions." He signalled for the check. "Shall we go face the music?" 20 minutes later, we pulled into the circular driveway of my father's estate. Every window blazed with light, and I could see figures moving frantically behind the curtains. "This looks ominous," Alexander observed. "This looks perfect." David's car was parked haphazardly near the front steps, and I could hear raised voices before we even reached the door. Alexander squeezed my hand as we entered the foyer. "Completely out of line," David was shouting. "Your sister is engaged to me. She has no business gallivanting around town with that bastard Hayes." "Maybe if you paid attention to your fiancé instead of drooling over her sister, she wouldn't need to find companionship elsewhere." Father's voice boomed back. I smiled. Perfect timing. We entered the living room to find a tableau of chaos. David stood in the centre, his hair dishevelled, his tie askew. Father sat in his leather chair, face red with fury. Mother perched on the sofa, clutching her pearls. And Vanessa. Vanessa was curled in the corner chair, tears streaming down her face, looking more terrified than I'd ever seen her. The room fell silent when Alexander and I appeared. "Well," I said pleasantly, "this looks cosy." David's face went through several colours as he took in my appearance. The expensive dress, the satisfied glow, the way Alexander's hand rested protectively on my lower back. "Where the hell have you been?" David demanded. "Dinner, as I mentioned last night." I moved to pour myself a drink from Father's crystal decanter. "Alexander, would you like something?" "I'm fine, thank you." His voice was cool, controlled, a sharp contrast to David's obvious agitation. "You can't be serious about this," David said, gesturing wildly between us. "We're getting married in 2 weeks, Amelia. 2 weeks." "Are we?" I took a sip of brandy and savoured the burn. "Because I've been thinking about what you said last night, about how I'm the only woman you want to marry." I meant every word. "Did you?" "Because I did some research today." I walked to my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Fascinating what a private investigator can dig up when you give them the right incentive. The colour drained from David's face. Vanessa made a small choking sound. "What are you talking about?" Mother demanded. I opened the envelope and spread the contents across Father's coffee table. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, photographs of David and Vanessa in intimate embraces taken over the past 3 months. "It seems my dear fiancé and my beloved sister have been conducting their own dinner dates," I said conversationally. "The Ritz-Carlton, the Four Seasons, that charming little inn upstate where they spent last weekend, while I thought Vanessa was visiting college friends." The silence was deafening. "Amelia," Vanessa whispered. "I can explain. Can you? Please enlighten us. Explain how you accidentally fell into bed with my fiancé, multiple times, in multiple expensive hotels." My voice was still pleasant, but ice cold. "I am particularly curious about this one." I held up a photograph that made Mother gasp and Father curse. David and Vanessa in a passionate embrace outside a jewellery store, her hand clearly displaying what looked like an engagement ring. "Were you planning to tell me before or after the wedding?" I asked. "Or were you just going to let me walk down the aisle and discover on my honeymoon that my husband was already married to someone else?" "It's not what it looks like," David started. "It looks like my sister seduced my fiancé and convinced him to propose while he was still engaged to me," I said. "What exactly am I misunderstanding?" Alexander moved closer to my side, his presence solid and reassuring. "This is quite a family you've got here, Amelia." "Oh, we're just getting started." I smiled at him, then turned back to the room. "You see, I know about the other things too. The joint bank account, the apartment lease in both your names, the vacation to Paris you've booked for next month, which, coincidentally, is supposed to be my honeymoon destination with David." Vanessa was sobbing now, great gasping sobs that would have moved me to sympathy in my previous life. Now they just sounded like the tears of someone who'd been caught. "But Here's my favourite part, I continued, pulling out the final photograph. This is from yesterday afternoon while I was getting ready for the gala. Care to explain why you were at the courthouse, David, with Vanessa, filling out marriage licence applications? Father shot to his feet. You what? We were going to tell you after, David began. After you what? I cut him off. After you married her while still engaged to me? After you committed bigamy? After you destroyed our family's reputation with your lies? We're in love, Vanessa suddenly screamed, jumping up from her chair. We've been in love for months. I'm sorry, Amelia, but you can't force someone to love you when they don't. The room exploded. Father started shouting at David. Mother began wailing about the scandal. David tried to explain himself to everyone at once, but I just stood there, perfectly calm, perfectly vindicated. Thank you, Vanessa, I said quietly, and somehow my voice cut through all the chaos. I was hoping you'd admit it. She stared at me in horror as the implications hit her. She'd just confessed to deliberately seducing my fiancé in front of our parents, with no provocation or justification. You tricked me, she whispered. I revealed you, I corrected. There's a difference. I turned to David, who was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. The engagement is over, I said simply. The wedding is cancelled, and, Vanessa, you're no longer welcome in this house. Amelia, please. David reached for me, but Alexander stepped smoothly between us. I think the lady made herself clear, he said in a tone that suggested David would be wise not to test him. I love you, David shouted desperately. This thing with Vanessa, it's just physical. It doesn't mean anything. You're the one I want to marry. I looked at him with something approaching pity. David, you still don't understand. I don't want to marry you anymore. I never want to see you again. I turned to Alexander, who was watching me with undisguised admiration. Shall we go? I asked. I believe you mentioned something about dinner at your place. With pleasure, he smiled, offering me his arm. As we walked toward the door, I could hear Vanessa screaming behind us. This isn't over, Amelia. You can't just walk away. We're sisters. I paused in the doorway and looked back one final time. No, I said quietly. Sisters don't push each other off bridges. They don't steal each other's lives. They don't destroy each other for sport. I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a kind expression. But don't worry, Vanessa. You got what you wanted. You have David now. I hope you're very happy together. As Alexander's car pulled away from the estate, I caught a glimpse in the side mirror of David and Vanessa standing in the doorway, both of them looking lost and somehow smaller than they had moments before. Feeling better? Alexander asked. Feeling free, I replied. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. He reached over and took my hand. Good, because I have plans for us, Amelia Brooks. Big plans. Oh, and what might those be? Well, for starters, I'm going to spend the next month reminding you what it feels like to be cherished by a man who actually deserves you. Then, I'm going to ask you to marry me properly, with a ring that puts David's pathetic attempt to shame. I laughed, surprised by the genuine joy in the sound. That's quite presumptuous of you. I'm a presumptuous man. It's gotten me this far. He brought my hand to his lips. Besides, I figure I owe it to David to steal the best thing that ever happened to him. Consider it professional courtesy. As we drove through the city lights toward whatever came next, I realised I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I wasn't thinking about Vanessa or David or the life they'd tried to steal from me. I was thinking about the future. About second chances and new beginnings, and the man beside me who saw me not as a consolation prize, but as the grand prize. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's simply living better than they ever could.